Hello, everybody. This is October 15th. It's actually an evening session, but today we continue to read out loud George Saunders, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. We're currently reading the first short story, the first Russian short story of literature, In the Cart by Anton Chekhov, written in 1897. And so, we've just passed this area where we've started thinking about and talking about the story, and I'll keep reading. She, Myra, had lost the habit of thinking of the time before she became a schoolmistress, and had almost forgotten all about it. She had once had a father and mother. They had lived in Moscow, in a big apartment near the Red Gate. But all that remained in her memory of that part of her life was something vague and formless, like a dream. Her father had died when she was 10 years old, and her mother had died soon after. She had a brother, an officer. At first they used to write to each other. Then her brother had stopped answering her letters. He had lost the habit. I had highlighted that in purple to the audience that I'm speaking to. I had highlighted that one in purple. I think a part of that because it's very reflective of less about her and maybe more about someone else. I don't know. Let's get back to the book. Of her former belongings, all that remained was a photograph of her mother. But the dampness in the school had faded it, and now nothing could be seen on it but the hair and the eyebrows of her mother. When they had gone a couple miles, old Semyon, who was driving, turned around and asked, "They have nabbed an official in the town. They have sent him away. They say that he came and some Germans killed Alexiev, the mayor in Moscow." "Who told you that?" said Myra. "They read it in the papers in Ivan Ionov's house." And again there was a long silence. Myra Vasilyevna thought of her school, of the examinations that were coming soon, and of the girl and the 4 boys whom she was sending up for them. And just as she was thinking about the examinations, she was overtaken by a landowner named Hanov in a carriage with 4 horses, the very man who had acted as examiner in her school the previous year. As he drew alongside, he recognized her and bowed. "Good morning," he said. "Are you driving home, madame?" So this is George speaking now. So I ended my last section by asking what else you wanted to know. What I wanted to know was, how did Myra get here in this crummy life? Chekhov answers in the first paragraph of this page. Myra, she's here because she has to be. She grew up in Moscow in a big apartment with her family. But then her parents died. She fell out of touch with her only sibling, and now she's alone in the world. A person could have, quote unquote, gotten here by being born out here in the sticks, or by being an idealistic young woman dedicated to rural improvement who broke off her engagement with a conventional, citified fiancé and fled to the countryside. But here's how Myra got here. Her parents died, and financial necessity compelled her. And all she has left of her family is that sad photograph in which her mother is just hair and eyebrows. So Myra's life is not just monotonous, but lonely. When we talk about fiction, we tend to use terms like theme, plot, character development, and structure. I've never, as a writer, found these very useful. Parentheses. Your theme's no good. Gives me nothing to work with, and neither does you might want to make your plot better. These terms are placeholders, and if they intimidate us and block us up, as they tend to do, we might want to put them aside and try to find a more useful way to think about whatever it is they're placeholding for. Here, in the novel, in the short story, Chekhov gives us an opportunity to reconsider the scary term, quote-unquote, structure. We might think of structure as simply an organizational scheme that allows the story to maintain a question it has caused its reader to ask. Me, at the end of the first page. Poor Myra, I already sort of care about her. How did she get here? Story, in the first paragraph of its second page. Well, she had some bad luck. We might imagine structure as a form of call and response. A question arises organically from the story, and then the story very considerately answers it. If we want to make a good structure or an organizational scheme, we just have to be aware of what question we are causing the reader to ask, then answer that question. In parentheses, see? Structure is easy. Ha, ha, ha. We've known from the first line of the story, they drove out of the town at 8:30 in the morning, that someone else was in the cart with Myra. Halfway down the page, we learn that this is old Semyon, and wait for Semyon to exhibit some characteristics. In parentheses, who are you, Semyon, and what are you doing in this story? If his answer is, I'm here to drive the cart, that's not good enough. 1,000,000 peasants could drive this cart. We're waiting to find out why Chekhov chose this specific person to do it. I'm just going to do a quick aside here and speak on what Phil thinks. There's something, again, we're reading this book to understand narrative. No, we're reading this book to understand storytelling. And so in the first part of this, we learned about specificity, and we also learned about answering and asking questions to a reader. And we are also learning about quickly adding more specificity as to draw people into the story. And as we continue reading this first short story, curated by George Saunders, we're now learning that the questions we ask also need to be revealed. We also want to know why the authors are choosing specific moments or people or character introductions to do so. Back to the words of George. So far, the story has declared itself to be about, approximately, a woman unhappy with the monotony of her life, a life forced on by her necessity. Semyon, by suddenly appearing, has become, whether he likes it or not, an element of that story, and, therefore, doesn't get to just drive the cart while gazing out at the scenery. He has to do something for this particular story, the one with bored, unhappy Myra in it. So, what have we learned about Semyon? Not much, not yet. He's old, he's driving. She's seated behind him, we realize. He tells her some news. The mayor of Moscow has been assassinated. Myra's response, parentheses, who told you that? Feels remonstrative and impatient. She doubts him. Semyon heard it read aloud from a newspaper in a tea house, which implies that Semyon can't read. And although Myra's skeptical, Semyon is actually correct. Nikolai Alexeyev, the mayor of Moscow, was, in fact, shot in his office by a deranged person in 1893. Myra's reaction? She goes back to thinking of her school. We don't know what to make of any of this yet, but our minds quietly file it under Semyon, stuff about, and Myra, stuff about. Our exception, given the extreme frugality of the form, is that the stuff in those files will prove meaningful later. In the penultimate paragraph of this page, Myra's thoughts about her students and the upcoming exams are interrupted when the cart is overtaken by a landowner named Hanov in a carriage with 4 horses, the very man who had acted as an examiner in her school the previous year. So let's pause here a second. How did your mind receive Hanov into the story? I recall here a phrase from old movies. What do you take me for? What did you take Hanov for? What did you think he was here in the story to do? There should be a name for this moment in a story when, a situation having been established, a new character arrives. We automatically expect that new element to alter or complicate or deepen the situation. A man stands in an elevator, muttering under his breath about how much he hates his job. The door opens. Someone gets in. Don't we automatically understand that this new person has appeared to alter or complicate or deepen the first man's hatred of his job? Otherwise, what's he doing here? Get rid of him and find us someone who will alter, complicate, or deepen things. It's a story, after all, not a webcam. Having understood Myra as she who is unhappy with the monotony of her life, we're already waiting for some altering presence to arrive. And here comes Hanov. This is the big event of the page, and notice this. Having made Myra on its first page, the story didn't stay static for long at all. We didn't get a second page merely explicating her boredom. This should tell us something about the pace of a story versus the pace of real life. The story is way faster, compressed, and engaged, exaggerated, a place where something new always has to be happening, something relevant to that which has already happened. The main way fiction writing is taught at Syracuse and at most MFA programs is by the way of the workshop model. 6 students come together once a week, having read work by 2 of their number, and we all discuss that work in a technical way. We each read the stories at least twice and line edited them and provided some pages of commentary. Then the fun begins. Before we launch into our in-class critique, I'll sometimes ask the workshop to come up with what I call the Hollywood version of the story, a pithy 1 or 2 sentence summary. It's no good to start making suggestions about a story until we've agreed on what it's trying to do. If a complicated machine showed up in your yard, you wouldn't start altering it and improving it until you had some idea of its intended function. The Hollywood version is meant to answer the question, what story does this story appear to want to be? This is done in the way artillery fire is directed, at least in my imagination, an initial shot, followed by a series of adjustments for precision. An unhappy woman is going somewhere in a cart. School teacher, Myra Vasilievna, unhappy because she's been teaching too long, is on her way home from a trip to town. A school teacher, Myra Vasilievna, unhappy because she's been teaching too long, bored with the monotony of her life, alone in the world, teaching out of only necessity, is on the way home from a trip in town. Myra, a bored, lonely school teacher, runs into a man named Hanov. Actually, she runs into a wealthy man named Hanov. He's a landowner, after all, and has those 4 horses. Notice that, in spite of the fact that we are literary sophisticates, engaged in a deep reading of Chekhov's masterpiece, we feel the sudden appearance of Hanov to be a potentially 19th century Russian meet-cute. A lonely school teacher runs into a wealthy landowner who, we feel, might transform her depressing life. Put a little more crassly, lonely woman encounters possible lover. There you go. That's that pithy 1 or 2 line Hollywood version of the story. So, where might the story go from here? Scan your mind. Make a list. Which of your ideas feels too obvious? That is to say, which, if Chekhov enacts them, which will disappoint you by responding too slavishly to your expectations. Hanov on the next page drops to one knee and proposes. That might disappoint. Which, too random, won't be responding to your expectations at all. A spaceship comes down and abducts Semyon? That seems a little strange. Chekhov's challenge is to use these expectations he created, but not too neatly. No pressure. So there you have it. That's where we'll stop for today's reading. We're moving along in Chekhov's book, or Chekhov's story, in the cart. And we've just kind of passed, I think, that page 2 or 3 mark. And what we've picked up today is that Hollywood version. What is the story about? It's got to be answered. The closer and the more clear we know about that, the better. As a writer, as someone that's storytelling, or that's saying short stories, we're causing our readers to get curious. We're causing the reader to imagine what could come next. We're causing the reader to try to be as simple as possible in what they're going to find out. And so, I'm Philip Chen. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you tomorrow.